In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read ancient tomes, the order of the Abercast. We are the brave and bold.
The Abercast. Occult. History. Conspiracy. Violence.
All right, welcome to the Abercast. Now it sounds all fucked up. Hold on.
Take control of your destiny. Understand your past, put your present in context, and know your future with a twist. Check out the designs and watch the videos about Abercast Tarot Card Deck on Advertise.com. When you order a deck, get a free exclusive bonus tarot card. Also, sign into the mailing list to get a free ebook about the Abercast Tarot Card Deck and other bonus content. Visit the storefront on Abercast.com.
That's what I get for doing last minute adjustments on my soundboard. All right, hey, so this is the Patreon stuff for November. I'm like so far ahead, everybody. So thank you. I've been threatening sort of to start this topic off. This sex magic topic. I've been kind of threatening to do it for a while, so I thought this would be a good place to start. And we're actually going back in time. The book we're talking about for this month is called The Influence of the Phallic Idea in Religions of Antiquity. It's by C. Staniland Wake. By C. Staniland Wake. It was written in 1870. So you know how I do it for these episodes. I just want to get right into it. All right. It will not be necessary for me to give details of rites by which the phallic superstition is distinguished, as they may be found in the works of Delore, Payne, Knight, and other writers. I shall refer to them, therefore, only so far as may be required for the due understanding of the subject to be considered. The influence of the phallic idea in religions of antiquity. The first step is the inquiry, is to ascertain the origin of the superstition in question. Faber ingeniously referred to primitive universal belief in the Great Father, the curious connection seen to exist between nearly all non-Christian mythologies. And he saw phallic worship as a degradation of this belief. Such explanation as this is, however, not satisfactory, since not only does it require the assumption of primitive divine relations, but proof is still wanting that peoples have, or ever had, any such notion of a great parent of mankind as the supposed to have been revealed. And yet there is a valuable germ of truth in this hypothesis. The phallic superstition is found essentially in the family idea. Captain Richard Burton recognized this truth when he asserted that amongst the barbarians whose primal want is progeny, we observe a greater or less development of phallic worship. This view, however, is imperfect. There must have been something more than mere desire to progeny to lead primitive men to view the genitive process with peculiar feelings embodied in this superstition. We are, in fact, here taken to the root of all religions, awe at the mysterious and the unknown, that which is which the uncluttered mind cannot understand is viewed with dread or veneration. It may be, and the object presenting the mysterious phenomenon may itself be worshipped as a fetish. What do you do, Kit? What are you doing? Crazy. The uncultured mind cannot understand is viewed with dread or veneration, as it may be the object presenting the mysterious phenomenon may itself be worshipped as a fetish, or the resident of presiding spirit. But there is nothing more mysterious than the phenomenon of generation, and nothing more important than the final result of the generative act. Reflection on this result would naturally cause that which led it to be invested with certain degree of superstitious significance. The feeling generated would have a double object, as it had a double origin. Wonder at the phenomenon itself as a perception of the value of its consequence. The former, which is the most simple, would lead to a veneration for the organs whose operation conducted to the phenomenon. Hence, the superstitious practice connected with the phallus and the yoni among primitive peoples. And moreover, we have explanations of numerous facts observed among Eastern peoples, such as the respect shown by women for the generative organ of dervishes and fakirs. Such also is the Semitic custom referred to in the Hebrew scriptures as putting of the hand under the thigh, which is explained by the Talmudists to be the touching of that part of the body which is sealed and made holy by circumcision. The custom, which was up to the recent date still in use among the Arabs, and the most solemn guarantees of truthfulness. The second phase of this phallic superstition is that which arises from perception of the value of the consequence of the act of generation. The distinction between this and the preceding phase is that while the one has relations to the organs engaged, the other refers more particularly to the chief agent. Thus, the father of the family is venerated as the generator. This authority is found altogether on the act and consequence of generation. We thus see the fundamental importance as well as the phallic origin of the family idea. From this has sprung the social organizations of all primitive peoples. An instance in point may be derived from Mr. Hunter's account of the Santals of Bengal. here says that the classification of the interesting people among themselves depends not upon social rank or occupation, but upon the family basis. This is shown to be the character of the 6 great ceremonies in Santol's life, which are admission to the family, admission to the tribe, admission to the race, union of his own tribe with another by marriage, formal dismission from the living race by cremation, lastly, a reunion with the departed fathers. We may judge from this character of certain customs which are widespread among primitive people, the phallic origin of which has long been lost sight of. The value set on the results of the generative act would naturally make arrival at the age of puberty an event of peculiar significance. Hence, we find various ceremonies performed among primitive and even among civilized people at this period of life. Often, when the youth arrives at manhood, other rites are performed to mark the significance of the event. Marriage, too, derives importance from the consequences which otherwise it would not possess. Thus, among many peoples, it is attended with certain ceremonies denoting its object, or at least marking it as an event of peculiar significance in the life of the individuals, or even in the history of the tribe. The marriage ceremonial is especially fitted for the use of phallic rites or symbols, former among semi-civilized people, often being the act of consummation itself, which appears to be looked on as part of the ceremony. It's just like fucking Game of Thrones. The symbolism we have ourselves retained to the present day in the wedding ring, which must have had a phallic origin, if, as appears probable, originated in the Samothracian mysteries. Nor does the influence of the phallic idea end with life. The veneration entertained for the father of the family as generator led in time to particular care being taken for the bodies of the dead, and finally to the worship of ancestors, which under one form or another distinguished all civilized nations of antiquity, as it does even now most people's heathen world. Now we're going to move into this section on circumcision. I'm going to need a drink for that. There is one phallic rite which from its nature and wide range is of peculiar importance. I refer to circumcision. The origin of this custom has not yet, so far as I'm aware, been satisfactorily explained. I will say the idea that under certain climatic conditions circumcision is necessary for cleanliness and comfort does not appear to be well-founded, as the custom is not universal even within the tropics, nor is the reason given by Captain Richard Burton in his notes connected with the Dahomen for both circumcision and excision perfectly satisfactory. The real origins of these customs has been forgotten by all peoples practicing them, and therefore they have not ceased to have their primary significance. The circumcision at least has a superstitious origin, may be inferred from the traditional history of the Jews. The old Hebrew writers, persistent with the idea that they were a peculiar people chosen by God for a special purpose, asserted this rite was instituted by Jehovah as a sign of the covenant between him and Abraham. Although we cannot doubt that this rite was practiced by the Egyptians and Phoenicians long before the birth of Abraham. Yet 2 points connected with the Hebrew tradition are noticeable. These are the religious significance and the act of circumcision. It is the sign of the covenant between God and man, and it is its performance by the head of the family. These two things are indeed immediately connected, since the patriarchal age of the father was always the priest of the family and the offer of the sacrifices. We have it on authority of the Veda that this was the case among the primitive Aryan peoples. Abraham, therefore, as the father and priest of the family, performed this religious ceremony of circumcision on the males of his household. The idea of my dad circumcising me terrifies me. Oh my God. That was before his drinking years, though, so I might have been all right. Circumcision in its inception is purely phallic rite, having for its aim the marking of which from its association is viewed with peculiar veneration, and it connects with the two phases of the superstition, which have for the object respectively the generation and the agent. We are thus brought back to the consideration of the simplest forms of phallic worship, that which is referenced to the generative powers viewed by the mysterious instruments and the realizations of that keen desire for children which distinguishes all primitive peoples. This feeling is so nearly universal that it is a matter of surprise to find that act by which it is expressed signalized as sinful. Yet such is the case, although the incidents in which the fact embodied are so veiled in figure that their true meaning has long been forgotten. Clemens Alexandrinus tells us that bacchanals hold their orgies in honor of frenzied Bacchus, celebrating their sacred frenzy by eating of the raw flesh, and they go through the distribution of the parts of the butchered victims, crowned with snakes, shrieking out the name of that Eve by whom error came into the world. And he adds the symbol of the Bacchic orgies. The Bacchic orgies is a consecrated serpent, and that according to the strict interpretation of the Hebrew term, the name Hiva aspired signifies a female serpent. We have here the reference of the supposed fall of man from pristine innocence, Eve, and the serpent being very what is this? I'm not used to reading on the screen. That's my problem. Eve and the serpent being very significantly introduced in close conjunction, and indeed becoming some sense identified with each other. The fact that the Arabic word for serpent, hayal, has been used to also mean life, and in this sense the legendary first human mother called Eve, or Chiva, in Hebrew Hawa, and its relations as asserted fact of the question of the fall, important bearing on the subject before us, quite irrespective of the impossibility of accepting the Mosaic cosmogony as a divinely inspired account of the origin of the world of man, the cosmogony which, with those of all other Semitic people, have purely phallic basis in the whole transaction said to have taken place in the Garden of Eden, fraught with difficulties and received interpretations. The very idea on which it is founded, the placing by God in the way of Eve, on a temptation which he knew she could not resist is sufficient to throw discredit on the ordinary readings of the narrative. In effect, indeed, that was to follow the eating of the forbidden fruit appears to an ordinary mind to furnish the most praiseworthy motive for not obeying, and command to abstain the eating of the forbidden fruit was simply a figurative mode of expressing the performance of the act necessary for the perpetuation of the human race, an act of which the origin was thought to be the source of all evil, evident in from the consequences which followed and from the curse entailed. Also, as to the curse inflicted Eve, it has always been a stumbling block on the way of commentators. For what connection had there been from eating fruit and sorrow and bringing forth children? The meaning is evident, however, when we know the conception and childbearing were the direct consequences of the forbidden act. How far this meaning was intended by the compiler of the Mosaic books, we shall see further on. Serpent symbolism associated with phallic worship. That we have in the Mosaic account of the fall, a phallic legend, is evident from other considerations connected to the narrative. The most important relate to the introduction of the serpent on the scene and the position it takes in inciting the cause of the sinful act. We are here reminded of the passage already quoted from Clemens Alexandrinus, who tells us that the serpent was a special symbol of the worship of Bacchus. Now, this annual holds a very curious place in the religions of the civilized peoples of antiquity, although in consequence of the influence of the later thought, it came to be treated as the personification of evil, and as such appears in the Hebrew legend of the fall. Yet before, this serpent was the symbol of wisdom and healing, like the caduceus. In the latter capacity, it appears even in connection with the exodus from Egypt. The battle of the serpents, it is the duel of the serpents. It is, however, in its character, a symbol of wisdom that is more especially claims our attention through these ideas are intimately connected with the power of healing, being merely a phase of wisdom. From our earliest times of which we have any historical notice, the serpent has been connected with the gods of wisdom. The animal was the special symbol of Thoth, or Tawut, a primitive deity of Syrio-Egyptian mythology, and of all those gods, such as Hermes and Seth, who can be connected with him. He is true also of the third member of the primitive Chaldean triad, Hea or Hoa. According to Sir Henry Rawlinson, the most important titles of this deity refers to his function as the source of all knowledge and science. He does mention Gnosticism here too. Cool. Okay, let's get to that. Not only is he the intelligent fish, but his name may be read as a signifying both life and a serpent. And he may be figured by the great serpent which occupies the conspicuous place among the symbols of the gods on the black stones recording Babylonian benefications. The serpent was also the symbol of the Egyptian Kemph, who resembled the Sophia of the Gnostics, the divine wisdom. The animal, moreover, was the... Oh boy, I ran into this the other day. Agathodemon. of the religion of antiquity and the giver of happiness and good fortune. It is the capacity, rather than having a phallic significance, that the serpent was associated with the sun gods, the Chaldean Bel and the Grecian Apollo and the Semitic Seth. But whence originated the idea of the wisdom of the serpent, which led to its connection with the legend of the fall? This may perhaps be explained by other facts which show also the nature of the wisdom here intended. Thus, the annals of the Mexicans, the first woman whose name was translated by the old Spanish writers, the woman of our flesh, as always represented by, accompanied by a great male serpent. The serpent is the sun god Tonacatl, the principal deity of the Mexican pantheon, and the goddess mother of the primitive man called Chihuahuitl, which signifies woman of the serpent. According to the legend, which agrees that with that other American tribes, a serpent must have been the father of the human race. This notion can be examined only by the supposition that the serpent was thought to have had at one time a human form. In the Hebrew legends, the tempter speaks, and the old serpent having 2 feet. In Persian mythology, it's none other than the evil spirit of Abraham himself. The fact that the serpent was only a symbol, or most an embodiment of the spirit, which is represented as we have seen from the belief of certain African and American tribes, which probably preserve the primitive form of this superstition. Serpents are looked upon by these peoples as the embodiment of their departed ancestors, and analogous notion is entertained by various Hindu tribes. No doubt the noiseless movement and the activity of the serpent, combined with its peculiar gaze and marvelous powers of fascination, led to being viewed by a spirit embodiment, and hence also by the possessor of wisdom. In the spirit character ascribed to the serpent, we have the explanation of association of its worship with the human sacrifice, noted by Mr. Ferguson, the sacrifice being really connected with the worship of the spirit character ascribed to the serpent. We have the explanation of the association of its worship with human sacrifice. All right, I'm just going to finish it. I doubled up. It's weird reading on the screens, bro. The human sacrifice noted by Mr. Ferguson. This sacrifice being really connected with the worship of ancestors. It is evident, moreover, that we may find here the origin of the idea of evil, sometimes associated with the serpent god, the kafir. In the Hindu, although he treats with respect any serpent which may visit his dwelling, yet entertains a suspicion of his visitant. It may perhaps be an embodiment of an evil spirit, or for some reason or another it is desire to injure him. Mr. Ferguson states that the chief characteristics of the serpents throughout the East in all ages seem to have been the power over the wind and the rain, which they gave or withheld according to their good or ill will towards man. The notion The notion, curiously confirmed by the title given to by the Egyptians to the Semitic god Seti or Seth, Typhon, which is the name of the Phoenician evil principle and also of a destructive wind, thus having curious analogy with represented in the animal world. Thus, there came to be not only good but also bad serpents, both of which are referred to in the narrative of the Hebrew Exodus. This is the duel of the serpents I was telling you about. But still more clearly in the struggle between the good and bad serpents of Persian mythology, which symbolized Ormunds and Mithra, the evil spirit Ahriman. So far I can discover the serpent symbol has not a directed phallic reference, nor, after all, it is attributed to the wisdom, the most essential. The idea most immediately associated with this animal was life, not present, but future, ultimately, no doubt, eternal. This is the snake Baya, and was figured a guardian of the doorway of the chamber of Egyptian tombs, which represented the mansions of heaven. A sacred serpent appears to have been kept in all Egyptian temples. They were told that many of the subjects in the tombs and the kings at Thebes in particular show the importance it was thought to enjoy the future state. The use of crowns formed of the asp or the sacred theramentis given to sovereigns and divinities, particularly to Isis, the goddess of life and healing, was doubtlessly intended to symbolize eternal life. This is the Ouroboros. The notion is quite consistent with the ideas entertained by the Phoenicians as to the serpent, which they supposed to have a quality of putting off its old age and assuming a second youth.
Are you interested in the occult, history, conspiracy, and violence? Learn more at Advertise.com. Find more episodes on this topic. Sign up for the mailing list for bonus content. Get access to the show archive. And visit the storefront for tarot cards, merch, and books. Learn more at Advertise.com.
Now we're moving into the next section called The Tree of Knowledge. The Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil. Another feature. Girl, what you doing? Another feature of the Mosaic legend of the fall, which deserves consideration, is the reference to the tree of knowledge or wisdom. And now, it is now generally supposed that the forbidden fruit was some kind of citrus. Well, you know what we think. It was wine, bro. Some kind of fermented fruit. But certain facts connected with the arbolarity seem to me to disprove this opinion. Among peoples, the most opposite regions, various species of the fig tree are held sacred. Thus it is throughout nearly the whole of Africa, with the Banya, Ficus indicus, and the secret tree of the Hindu Brahmins. Even on the several of the Polynesian islands, as in various parts of Indian archipelago and the northern Australia, the fig tree is highly venerated. In ancient Egypt, the banya or the Ficus sycamoris was always considered sacred. So it was in Greece and Italy. According to Plutarch, the basket of figs formed one of the chief objects carried in the procession of the honor of Bacchus. The sacred phallus itself appears to have been made of wood of the fig tree, as was also the statue of the phallic god Priapus. Judging from the facts And considering that the sycamore was sacred among the Hebrews themselves, the fruit having the significance of the virgin womb, there could be a little difficulty in identifying the fig tree, whether the sycamore or the banyan, and the tree of knowledge planted in the midst of the Garden of Eden. The sense intended to be conveyed by this expression would be evident enough without the introduction of the tree of life. That this is intended to represent the male element is undoubted. Okay, so I always had that question. I always had that question about why are there two different trees? And so this guy's saying that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is like the pussy tree. And the tree of life is the dick tree. The Chaldean god Hea, who is symbolized by the serpent, was also the god of life and of knowledge. And Rawlinson states that there are very strong grounds indeed for connecting him with the serpent of the scripture and with the paradisical traditions of the tree of knowledge and the tree of life, the bow tree, ficus religious, of the Buddhists, is said to derive greater sacredness from its encircling palm, the pyra palm being the kapla tree or the tree of life, the Hindu paradise. This connection is termed by the Buddhists the bow tree united in marriage with the palm. And we have the perfect idea of generative activity as the combination of the male and female elements. Mr. Ferguson, in accordance with this special theory and the origin of serpent worship, thinks that the superstition characterized by the old Turanian, by which he probably means Hamatic, this is gibberish, empire of the Chaldean, while tree worship was more characteristic of the later Assyrian Empire. This opinion is no doubt correct, and it means really that the older race had the form of faith, which the serpent was always indirectly connected. Adoration of the male principle and generation is the primitive phase of which probably ancestor worship, while the later race adored the female principle, symbolized by the sacred tree, the Assyrian grove. The tree of life, however, undoubtedly had its reference to the male element. And we may well suppose that originally the fruit alone was treated symbolically of the opposite principle. There is still an important point connected with the Hebrew legend which requires consideration. The nature of the protecting cherub. He calls it a cherub. We here call it a cherub. Is merely intended as a symbol of the deity himself. There is every reason to believe that the symbol was nothing more than the sacred bull of antiquity. It's evident from the description of the cherub given by Ezekiel chapters 1 and 10. But what was the religious significance of the bull, an animal which could be easy to prove? Was venerated by nearly all the peoples of antiquity. As well known, the bull symbolized the productive force in nature and hence was associated with the sun gods. The symbolic figure carried in procession during the festivals of Osiris and Isis was representative probably of the phallus of this animal, according to the cosmogony of the Zed Avesta, Oromuzd. After he had created the heavens and the earth, he formed the first being called by Zoroaster the primeval bull. And this bull was poisoned by Ahriman, and its seed was carried by the soul of the dying animal, represented as an Ized to the moon, where it continually purified and functuated by the warmth, the light of the sun, to become the germ of all creatures. Yet at the same time, the material prototypes of all living things, including man himself, issued from the body of this bull. This is but a developed form of the ideas which anciently were almost universally associated with this animal. Among those peoples were addicted to sun worship. There was no doubt, however, that the superstitious veneration for the bull existed, as it still exists, quite independently from the worship of the heavenly bodies. The bull, like the goat, must have been a sacred animal in Egypt before it was declared to be an embodiment of the sun god Osiris. In some sense, indeed, the bull and the serpent, although both of them became associated with solar deities, were antagonistic. The serpent was a symbol of the personal male element, or rather had special reference to the life of man, while the bull had relations to nature as a whole, and symbolically the idea of functuity. This antagonism was brought to an issue, the struggle between Osiris and Seth, which ended in the triumph of the god of nature, although it was renewed even during the Exodus, when the golden calf of Osiris, or Horus, was set up in the Hebrew camp. Reference made to the serpent, to the tree of wisdom, and to the bull of the legend of the fall insufficiently proves its phallic character, which is still indeed recognized by the early Christian church. This is confirmed, moreover, by the analogous legend of other mythologies. The Hindu legend approaches that nearly to that preserved in the Hebrew scriptures. Thus it is said that Siva, or the supreme being, desired to tempt Brahma, who had taken a human form. And for this object, he dropped from heaven a blossom of the sacred fig tree, and Brahma, instigated by his wife Satarupa, endeavors to obtain the blossom, thinking its possession will render him immortal and divine. But when he has succeeded in doing so, he is cursed by Siva and doomed to misery and degradation. Mr. Hardwick, when commenting on this, tradition, adds that the sacred Indian fig is endowed by the Brahmins and the Buddhists with mysterious significance as the tree of knowledge or intelligence. The legend confirms what I have said as to the nature of the Hebrew tree of knowledge. It is also a phallic explanation of the fall itself, which is considered the attributes of the tempter of the Hindu story. The Persian legend preserved in the Bawan Tudesh is, however, still more conclusive. According to this legend, Makia or Mashina, the first man and woman, are seduced by Araman under the form of a serpent, and they then first committed in thought, word, and action the carnal sin that and thus tainted with the original sin of all their descendants. All right. And that's one in the books. Thank you, guys. And there'll be more on this. We're going to do more on it. Peace. See ya.
Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. Please send an email or find us on social media and let us know what you think about the show. We would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star rate and review wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can find Stigmata Studios, graphic, novels, and comic books at Advertise.com.